Okay, well, one other person has had to work night and day, live it night and day. When I first met him, we were walking into the Rose Creek pen, no, Crystal Creek pen. His hair was nice brown black. So was the beard. And I think mine may have been. Let me give me 2 seconds here. Oh, there you go.
You have hair.
There you go. You're on.
Okay, this is tough. I didn't know what everybody was going to say, and so I wasn't sure what to prepare. And I'm a big, I speak a lot, and I like to have thought ahead of time what I'm going to say. And this is one of those times where I wasn't able to do that. So some of this is going to be reminiscing and storytelling, and a lot of that's already occurred, and so I don't need to say as much as I was planning. But, you know, I came here, and I think that the testimonies that have preceded me, I came here not in the kind of shock and awe of what wolf restoration meant to Yellowstone, because I was not a born and bred Yellowstoner. I was looking at multiple job options, and I wanted to stay in the Midwest and work with wolves. And you know, working in Yellowstone was pretty far afield, and you know, we love the woods we wander in, you know, and the woods I was wandering in were in the Midwest, and intimacy breeds love. And so this was kind of a tough decision for me to come to Yellowstone to work with wolves. But wolves were for me at that time, and we've dealt with this a lot in the last 25 years, as all of you in this room attest to, something very important to me, not just as a profession, but as a human being. And so I came in with others. Mike was my boss. We were the only 2 people hired. The goal was to have 3 people hired, but there wasn't enough money to hire. And this is in addition to the people that were here, that Norm was talking about. John Varley, Wayne Brewster needs to be mentioned. But only 2 of us got hired particular to wolves. And so not having all of this aura and background and history about wolves in Yellowstone, I was just purely a wolf person. And so what I was interested in was doing the best research and science possible. And I was not taken up by the great wave of history of what returning wolves to Yellowstone has done. And so that was our start. And Mike was here, and we worked on this together. Mike was only here 2 years, and I don't say that to kind of say, you know, he had a brief period, but he did, but he had a very important period. And Mike is a policy guy, a nuts and bolts guy, loves you know, the big stage, and Mike Finley was a superintendent at the time, and I took out Jane Fonda and Ted Turner to see the wolves in the pen. I think, what is that, 5 of us. After that trip, Ted hired Mike Finley and Mike Phillips away to other jobs. And that's what happened to both of them. The superintendent and the Wolf Project leader leave, and I wondered what I did wrong. You know, because they're private sector, and you know, the amount of money they're making, and you know, Jane Fonda, she held you at arm's length. You know, very early on, you could tell, don't get close. Don't get close if you come in and ask, you know, personal questions. I had no intentions of doing anything like that. But, you know, my goal was to build up the knowledge after Mike left, or actually during when Mike was here. And so I think that's one of the great gifts the Yellowstone wolves have given to really the world. Because one thing that it was not mentioned is, and partly of this is due to all the folks in the room here, Yellowstone wolves are big attractions. They pull in the headlines. And I cannot tell you how many times I have heard, you know, we need some good news out there about wolves, because you go to the Midwest, you go to Canada, you go to Alaska, you go to the Southwest, you go to Europe, you go to Russia, and a lot of times the news is just bad news. How do we live with this animal? And Yellowstone consistently does two things. The news is good and the facts are right. And we have the details down. And that's because of everybody's commitment. Everybody's commitment. And you know, to a degree, the government stepped back. Our program is overwhelmingly funded through grants and donations, as Jim has just donated 2,000 more. And that's the story that is worth telling. The voice the park and you guys have given wolves. And I'll go one step further. And I don't want to get too, whatever here, but, wild nature is on the run. It really is. And you can't have wild nature without all of the constituents that are there. And that's hard to get. And it's a human-dominated world out there. And when you try and put the wolf piece in, there are many missing parts. And I've been criticized soundly through the years of favoring wolves. I want to speak for all of nature, but wolves are particularly difficult because they're political, they're high profile, and they're one of the hardest things to get in there last. And quite honestly, sometimes it's not reasonable. And that's what a lot of people accuse us of, is being extremists, not being reasonable about what wolves do, what wolves are, and where wolves belong. But they're the hardest piece to get in that puzzle of pristine nature, of wild nature, which is on the run and arguably on the decline. And Yellowstone, its entire history, has been kind of a broken park. I mean, 1872, you had many insults, fur trade, market hunting, fire suppression, bison control, predator control, elimination of wolves, elimination of cougars, elimination of coyotes, all of it's going on. I mean, the whole idea of what is natural was worked out in the 20th century in Yellowstone, and for most of the time, people weren't even talking about wolves. So getting this place fixed and closer to pristine, even though that's elusive and can't be achieved, was really hard. And it's as good as it's been, and a lot of that is because of the voice that you guys provided, anchored by knowledge, and all of you have contributed to that as well. And so this is very, very rare thing to have. It's a precious thing to have, and moving forward, that's, several people have alluded to the next 25 years. What you guys can do, and I know you're all passionate, is to be that voice for the wolves, for the wild, for Yellowstone. Because I guess by nature I'm an idealist, and hand in hand with that goes pessimism, because nothing's ever as good as you think it should be. But that's what needs to be done, is you guys have in many ways accomplished a great deal, but it's not over. And things like wolves, we used to talk about this a lot on the project, they don't care what we think or what we do. And by the way, as an aside, they deserve all the credit. So, Norm and Jim and Rick and others, John Varley, Nathan Varley, we did set the table, but they did the rest. And that's the strength and adaptability and durability to this species. And then the things that they can do subtly, iteratively, one little piece at a time, to make nature wild, pristine, or as close as we can get in this day and age. And so that is what's very important, is that you guys, your voice for that continues. Because when I thought about tonight, how do you say anything, our culture is kind of stuck, we are kind of stuck. We're not all together on this. And I think wolves are one thing we could be together on. It's not that bad. There's a spate of interviews going on now. There'll be a spate of them going on through March. I've already done a couple. Ed Bangs has been pulled out of retirement to do a couple. And you know, and Jim's already said it tonight, they didn't kill off the northern Yellowstone elk herd. There's more elk in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming now than probably at the start of wolf recovery 25 years ago. Deer populations are healthy. You know, Comrade Burns said there'd be a dead child within a year. You know, we're 25 years in and no one's even been bit. You know, and then as Nathan brought up, and Lynn, no, maybe more accurately Linda, the economy that's benefited to this thing. And so this is an opportunity on the 25th. We're going to use it as a platform in the park. By the way, the park did not celebrate the 5th, the 10th, the 15th, or the 20th. That was deliberate because a lot of people felt like it was, you know, a poke in the eye to the people who were still angry. You know, and half this town is still angry. You know, and so, you know, besides being the voice, and not just wolves of nature, how do we move that? You know, and that's the thing I think I've seen in my brief compared to the Warriors, 25 years here. How do we move that mindset of, no, the real Montana, the real Montana is not wolves. You know, and that's something I think the next 25 needs to consider as well, as for you guys staying engaged as a voice for nature. One other thing I said, because it's really hard to fill in after all these folks who have spoken, but you know, the tensions within the team, and you know, when you have something this big, you know, people talk about this person and that person and this person and whatever. You can't assign credit, even to these big politicians. You know, Jim McClure, Wayne Owen, William Penmont. It was a groundswell of work over 20 years. But I was confused at first because I thought the National Park Service was doing all the work. And I met Ed Bangs and I met Steve Fritz, and I knew Steve from previous work, and I didn't know Ed. And Ed was the absolute right recovery coordinator because he was charismatic. And this is a compliment, not a criticism. He was also a little flippant. You know, when you deal with wolves, you're going to deal with criticism, and Ed would be like, oh, that doesn't matter. Details. You needed a figurehead. You know, Ed would show up at meetings without a pencil and a piece of paper. You know, this would be a planning meeting for Canada. And that was Ed. And, you know, great guy. We're still good friends.
Can I tell
Sure.
a 20-second story?
Sure.
Just to illustrate how close to a stand-up comedian he was. He was talking to a group of people who included a lot of ranchers and outfitters and so on, hunters, and one of them said, "Well, I just think this whole wolf thing is just a job program for wolf biologists." And Ed said, "It's working for me."
Ed is not, and again, I'm not trying to make a pinata out of Ed, or this is all in the spirit of, we just did 2 interviews today, and he did a bunch of emails saying, "God, you look a lot older than me." So this is my chance. But he's not a huge fan of long-term research. There is an idea out there that all wolves need, like I said 5 minutes ago, was a toehold, and let them do the rest. And he is of the mind they did it. So, you know, you can kill as many as you want, and the regulations can be like this, the policy can be like, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. And, you know, I'm like, don't you want to know a little bit about the vital rates? And, you know, we can go back and forth on that, but he truly believes that the hurdle was just getting them in there. But you needed a figurehead like Ed to do it, and his right-hand man was Steve Fritz, who was a detail guy. He was soft-spoken, well-read, well-written, and Steve was a lot of the brains behind it. Both Steve and Ed said to me a couple times, "Doug, even though the wolves are being released and pens are being put in Yellowstone, this is a Fish and Wildlife Service led project. We deal with endangered species. You are a sister organization who is definitely below us. And so I'm just going to, this is a walk down memory lane. I'm going to go a little bit fast because you've been talked to for a while. A few slides at the end of kind of current, but there is one, and you've seen it in the newspaper today. Actually, there's a nice article done today, the day, about Norm. It was mostly about Norm and his contribution, and it was a great piece. And a couple of these photos were in there, but there was a debate, that crate, that famous crate carried by the Secretary of the Interior and Molly Beatty, Mike Finley, and then Evanoff. Norm should have been anchoring that one, not Evanoff. But there's a Fish and Wildlife Service medal sticker on it. And we had a debate if it should be Park Service or Fish and Wildlife. Because of what we're dealing with now, 25 years later, it's still Fish and Wildlife Service. And they're like, nope, we did this, you guys helped us with it. And Ed, every step of the way, and Kira would know this better than me, probably, but there's roughly 2,000 wolves in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming right now, and Ed still calls me up to this day and goes, the 100 in Yellowstone don't matter. 1,900 everywhere else, all your wolves could go away and it would not matter for the whole region. And so my comeback always is Ed, the Yellowstone wolves give wolves worldwide a voice. And they need that voice. And you guys have contributed to that voice. And so consider how important that is. Hold that dearly. You don't get many chances in life to have that much impact. So this is year one. There was an effort in November, December in Alberta. Carter Niemeyer, Jim Till, Joe Fontaine, all went up to Canada to work with trappers to catch wolves, snare wolves. They paid them more alive than dead to put out collars, what they call Judas wolves. So we could go in January and helicopter dart entire packs. Our sister project, Idaho, was just getting individuals. No soft release, just let them go, let them roam the Idaho wilderness and settle. We wanted to put them in pens. After that, I didn't dig through enough photos to pull those photos out from that Canadian November, December operation. If you know Carter, it doesn't take much to lube him up to talk about all that stuff. Talking about skinning contests in these trappers' living rooms in Canada. Who could skin a wolf fast enough is one of his favorite stories about gaining street cred with these trappers, because they viewed us as just a bunch of bureaucrats. But when Carter could beat the guy in a skinning contest in his living room, we were good to go. So the wolves were flown into Great Falls, Montana. That's where this was. And from Great Falls, they were shipped to, trucked to here. Now this was difficult. I don't know if I have any photos of this, but you had to hold the wolves at a compound in Alberta in chain link fences. You had to get enough together to make a shipment worthwhile. And so you think about things about how durable are they, how are they going to deal with this, will they drink or eat and all that kind of thing. By and large they didn't. They just gutted it out, but they stayed in these chain links, and then they were drugged and put into these shipping tanks or shipping containers. Norm, a quote from him today in the Bozeman Chronicle was, each of these containers weighed 100 pounds, and your average wolf weighs 100 pounds. And so they had these metal, they pulled out and in, and it would take 4 people to carry one, because you're going 200 pounds up the hill. So they were loaded in these, the plane. This is famous wolf number 7 in one of those. I don't know if Jim took this one when 7 got here. A lot of these are Jim's photos, but of course on the way one of the wolves got out of the shipping container, was running around the horse trailer. That was quite a story. Luckily Mark Johnson was along, so that wolf that was 38. so he could be drugged and put back in the shoe. You know, the bars were bent type thing, you know. I mean, he was an outlier. And if you've ever handled wolves in traps that you catch and they're, you know, not sedated when you get there, you know, 9 out of 10 cower and hide from you, and the 1 out of 10 comes right at you. And, you know, when you have the jab stick or the Y pole or the snatch pole and you're trying to get them, 38 was that wolf, that 1 out of 10 that came at you. And so this was Gardiner. This day, exactly 25 years ago, Jim told this, you know, the kids were let out of school. There were, you know, key people. Renee Askins had the Wolf Fund. And she gained a ton of credibility because her goal, and she was a great writer, and she pulled in Hollywood star power, you know, Harrison Ford, Peter Matheson, were on her boards. She wrote an article for Harper's Magazine, really hard magazine to get into. Plus, you know, the first sentence was, if I was a rancher, I wouldn't want wolves either. You know, so she was, you know, empathetic, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And she said, as soon as wolves are in Yellowstone, I'm closing my doors. And she did that with money in the bank. So she got an incredible amount of credibility doing that. Roger Schlickheisen was up here on the hill that day from Defenders. This was their signature issue for several years. There were other groups, Wolf Recovery Foundation, National Wildlife Federation. I dearly wanted to go to Canada. You know, that was where all the action was, come down with the wolves. Wayne Brewster, our structure at that time was John Barley. He was director of ICR. Wayne Brewster was his right-hand man. Some people called him John's hatchet man. Norm was here. And then Mike and I and many others. You know, Kerry Gunther gave a testimony, Jim Pico and others. But so I was like, Mike, why can't we go to Canada? They have plenty of people up there. We need to make, and you know, Wayne Brewster was a big detail man. Big detail man. John Barley told me, or maybe this is Norm Bishop, Wayne Brewster was hired in Yellowstone because he was a master bureaucrat. And he deserves a tremendous amount of credit because the structure to bringing the wolves in was an ICS structure, internal command structure, and there's like 30 people. And everybody had a little teeny job. But it was met every week because everything had to go down perfectly the day the wolves came in. And Wayne Brewster headed that process up. Everyone had a role, and boy, when they came in, everyone knew what to do. And mine was not to go to Canada, not to be at the Arch. I was in Mammoth waiting with warmed up pickup trucks ready to go to Crystal. And this is Crystal, and oops. This is Mark Johnson, the vet. He was in Canada. He was hired prior to this. This is Bob Blackwell and Wally Wines, both solid anti-wolf cowboys. But you know, I learned a lot because we talked. We talked a lot, and we both all of us liked horses, and we got over it. And I don't know if I won them over. They didn't win me over, but we got along and kind of inched a little bit more each other's way. And I think that's the best you can do. This was the best mule, Bob, and he knew it because he had an attitude. And he tried to run several of us over, and he did Mark Johnson. And you know, the culture in Yellowstone is very safety oriented, and this almost nosedived the feeding program because what you have to do is before the mules are hooked to the sled, you actually have to get in front of them and hold their bits on the inside, and they know they're free and can run you over. And if you're not adequately stout in front of them, if you show any kind of hesitation that you might be nervous, they'll run you over. And so that happened with Mark. And so this is the single most famous photo taken. It was in the paper today. I wanted that to be park service. I was put in place very quickly. But this is, and you know, joking's a big part of life, but Mike, you're not doing anything. You're just walking in front, and you got the frickin' Secretary of the Interior, who is really the highest ranking person here. If anything, he should be walking here. And then, of course, I still don't know how he got in that photo. There's G-Man, right there. There's G-Man.
I can tell you, John Varley wanted to be very inclusive about the people who were doing this, and Jim Evanoff was our maintenance foreman in the park, and he had put up the pens, and he had engineered those, he had basically following Mark Johnson's instructions, had done an exquisite job of putting up the pins. So he deserved a spot on one of the parks.
That's not the story Jim told. And these were the pens. This is the Crystal Creek pen. This is 4. That's 5. She had a distinctive eye kind of mark. And you know, we were really worried about what life would be like. And the pens were round. They're 10 foot high. They had a 2-foot overhang. They had a 4-foot skirt underneath, so they couldn't dig out. They weren't designed to be used in summer, although we ended up using them at that time, but no corners at all, as G-Man said. They could get a run on an angle and go all the way up to the top. In fact, one in the Rose Creek pen, a wolf did get out because a tree fell on the overhang, and it caused it to be, instead of together like that, it caused it to be, and this wolf literally ran up and hung off of it with its teeth from there because of that incongruity or that unevenness, and then worked its way over. Wow. So we had a wolf get out. That was the Nez Perce pen. But, you know, it was, you know, we got a lot of criticism, like we still do. We still get a lot of criticism. But, you know, you're going to make the wolves used to people, because we went up twice a week to feed them roadkill or carnivore logs, which are horse meat that's denatured. They can't smell it because sometimes it got hard driving up and down the road, picking up roadkill. And so you just get these zoo logs from, you can order it. And you're going in twice a week, and the wolves didn't like it. Just as Jim said, you know, they were freaking out. I mean, these wolves came from Canada. They're heavily persecuted by humans in Canada. They knew who we were, and if anything, we reinforced their fear of people. So, you know, newspaper would write about people, you know, you're habituating the wolves to people. No, this reinforced it. But some wolves did chew on the fence. 29 was one of the more famous ones who did this. 30 did it too. But they broke their canines. They would, you know, we'd come in and they were so nervous, they would actually chew that chain link. And not all of them did it, but some broke their teeth. And that was kind of part of the cost of reintroduction. 29, when we ended up catching him 3 times, and I saw his broken canines, and he was still out there killing elk with broken canines. And so, you know, when they want to do something, they overcome not having all the right equipment. And so this is a similar look in that. And they had 24-hour, we were so worried because of anti-wolf feelings, they had 24-hour-a-day protection. Rangers were out all night long that first year. Up at the pens, they built Quonset huts, they had warming devices in them. They were there going around the pen 24 hours a day. The second year, they just did road coverage, but that was 24 hours as well. So this was a huge operation. And so this is, it looks like Mike, and this is, so we took the wolves up that first day, January 12th, as G-Man said. The entourage went back to Mammoth for a press conference, and then a second group of people, we went to Rose Creek. That was a harder effort because you had to take the mules up a steeper hill, and then go down a gully, and then up a gully. And we were not allowed to let them out of their shipping crates because the Farm Bureau filed a lawsuit when the wolves were en route. I mean, a dirty trick. You know, they're on their way. The judge ruled, you know, I don't know, I actually ended up meeting Judge Downs at a dinner a couple years after. He explained some of his rationale to me. I never asked him this, but I don't think he knew in Yellowstone that we weren't liberating them into the wild. We're letting them go in pens. They could have easily caught. So why did you order that we had to keep them in the shipping crates? Idaho we get, because they're letting them go directly into the wild, but why did you do that in Yellowstone? And so we put them in the pen and didn't open these doors. And we had to go back. We went to Rose Creek, and then we came back from Rose Creek, and I was instructed to stay at the Buffalo Ranch. And I ended up going to the Crystal Creek Trailhead, stayed there. And they were dealing with trying to get Judge Downs to say, you can let him go into the pen, which did happen, but it didn't come, this is January 12th, so it's dark at 5. This word didn't come till 7, 8 at night. So we had to hike up to Crystal Creek and open these gates at, this is probably not that date. This is probably the Nez Perce pen, actually, which was later. And so we opened them at night, and then we hiked up to the Rose Creek pen, and that was, by the time we got there, it was 2, 3 in the morning. We're snowshoeing. It was me, Mike Phillips, Wayne Brewster, John Mack. I think that was it. And I remember Wayne, the master bureaucrat. I thought those guys were kind of impenetrable. They weren't moved by much. But he turned to me in the middle of the night and said, "No one's ever going to do anything like this again." So it really was a moment in the night, opening these doors, and most of them didn't come out, but I remember at Rose Creek, one of them did. I think it was 7, I don't know, it was dark, but we opened the door, stepped back before we got into the pen. She was out into the pen, and that is a strange moment. They've been in the crates that long, they had been through so much. And as I said, the aura of Yellowstone for me hadn't really taken root yet, but the aura of Yellowstone was part of my childhood, wolves. The aura of wolves was my childhood, and having that wolf come out in the night after all it had been through, and I was starting to get a feel for all that it had taken to get it to that point, that was a magical moment, for sure. So I think this is Nez Perce, and Nez Perce was a 96 operation. And so, some wolves, a lot of wolves would just stay in the back of the shipping crate. And it was my job to check on them. So I would lift up these doors. There was a sliding door that was solid, then there was another sliding door that was barred. And, I gave them ice, I gave them meat, they didn't touch either. They were always kind of cowered back. John Weaver was doing the same exact job in Idaho, and he got his thumb hit, almost off. But, they looked so sedate, I got kind of sloppy around them. And boy, you had to remember, one of them, when John was putting the ice in or the meat in, Wolf went and got his thumb, because he came to Yellowstone the next week, big bandage on his thumb. So it wasn't as safe as I thought. This is a 9 and 7. They came together. 10 was introduced to them in the pen. This was a match-made pair that we called it. Famously, they went on to produce that first litter in 95. We didn't know they'd breed in the pens. They did, but so did Butte. They bred. That was the first year's reproduction, totally unpredicted. This is 10. Upon release, 7 left right away. 9 and 10 traveled over by Red Lodge. 10 got shot. Gary Ferguson, I won't go into it, but he wrote about this the best in the Yellowstone Wolves the first year, the whole Chad McKittrick story. He ended up getting convicted for this. We brought 9 and her pups back to the pen, acclimated them. Yeah, okay. But this is the job Norm was talking about, building those pens, the roundedness, no corners. And the Rose Creek pen is still up, and we still can't decide what to do with it as an institution. Some people want it taken down because it's technically in the back country. It's a structure that's a no-no. Other people want it left up as a historic site forever, maybe a hard side sign there. So it's still debated. Everything in the government goes in waves and cycles, and there are periods of time when people talk about it a lot, and then periods of time when people don't do anything or talk about it at all. But this is the design for it. You can see no corners. After maintenance built the first 3, the Wolf Project built the next 4. And so, I went to school to learn about biology, ecology, and conservation, and I spent a lot of time building pens. I spent a lot of time riding horses with dead meat on them to feed wolves. So I had to adapt to the job. Did John Potter make it? I threw this one in because he texted me saying that he wanted to make it today. This is John Potter here. This is Scott, his friend, and they wanted to bless the wolves, Native Americans. Do you remember what tribe, Rick? Sioux, I think, and they wanted to say something, and they have come back every March, I believe, every year. What? Crow. Thank you. Oops, that was a mistake. They've made it back every year, and they have a ceremony near Crystal to celebrate the return of the wolves. He texted me this morning saying, I want to come, what's the schedule? And so sorry that John couldn't make it. I took out Chief Tobel, took him up to the Soda Butte Pen on a mule-drawn sleigh. We took him and left him. He wanted to say a prayer for the wolves. So this was a big deal to many Native Americans to bringing back the wolf. And so the real work began when they were in the pen. We had to feed them twice a week. And then we ended up, because of 9 and 10, we ended up having wolves in the pen in the summer. I did a crash course in horse packing, getting all that stuff up there all summer. But this took a lot of time. That's Ben. He's still here, born and raised Gardiner. Another dyed-in-the-wool, anti-wolf guy. Although Ben's approach to life is never let on to what you're truly thinking. Like a mule. Ben grew up with mules. And truly, when you look at the eyes of that mule, you don't know what it's thinking. But it's taking absolutely everything in. And that's Ben. So maybe he's a wolf lover in disguise. And won't admit it. There he is. He was very upset at this photo because we had a photographer who took a lot of the pictures for the book Mike and I wrote, The Wolves of Yellowstone. And the photographer was not tuned in to mules or Ben. And we went up to feed the wolves because we wouldn't let anybody go to the pen other than a feeding event. So if someone wanted to see him, and we did let rangers go, we did let concessionaire employees go. We went to the pen, but it was no extra trips. It had to be part of a feeding. So this photographer went up there. He was taking pictures at the Crystal Creek pen, and at the bottom of the small hill was Ben with the mules at minus 50. And we're not allowed to work at minus 50 anymore. The Park Service is like minus 25, code blue, you're in the office. This is the good old days. Because of climate change, it doesn't get to minus 50 anymore. But Ben, needless to say, was not happy when we got back to the pen, the wagon, standing down there for like 45 minutes in minus 50 with the mules, waiting for this photographer to do his thing. So this is the wolves in the pen. Theoretically, you could capture and handle them, but it was at times difficult. And this is where Jim and others, like Mike and I, were the only people with wolf experience hired, and we would ask people to come help us catch wolves, and the looks you would get on the face. Would you help me go up and grab this wolf? And you know what the wolves would do? They would read those people's body behavior right away. Like, this person is afraid and scared, and so they would just walk right by that person. And I'm like, throw the net over the wolf. And the wolf knew who was afraid. And the person's like, there's no way I want to do that. So I ended up just having to yell at them to use them as a decoy. There's Deb and Mike, two Mike, project leader. Deb was one of the early volunteers, like Jim was talking about. Nathan was one of the early volunteers. Linda was one of the early volunteers. Kira started off volunteering. We have people in the back doing projects. I don't think Jeremy started off volunteering. He got right away. This was the Rose Creek pups before we let them go. There's Deb in the old days. We had to move. These are the sawtooth pups that we moved to the Nez Perce pen for release. just stacked up in a wagon like cordwood. Those were pups. Carrie Schaefer, Mark Beal. I forget who that guy is. Do you know Carrie?
It looks like Les Breton.
Okay. Carrie was another volunteer early on.
Mark Beals in Glacier now?
Mark Beals in Glacier. This is,
John Gerster.
that's right, John, and this was one of the ranger huts to keep an eye on the pen. And so this is the day we opened it. Historic day. That's Mike Phillips, Steve Fritz, and the wolves didn't want to come out the door. You know, so the door that we walked in and out of there very narrow, although 10 did come out. 9 and 7 wouldn't. This is actually the crystal pen. We were having trouble getting wolves out, so we were like, okay, we got to create several openings, and openings that they might not be wary of because they're worried about us coming through the door all the time. So we actually cut the pen, and this is us doing that. This is a big deal. You know, Steve, as he was so mild-mannered, humble, rare quality with people nowadays to be soft-spoken and humble. You know, and he was one of the big architects behind the plan. You know, Ed's the front man. Steve was a quiet guy behind, so very important to have him do this. And this was when I began to catch on that, you know, this is a big deal. This isn't just about, you know, the next wolf study that we can do. This is history making. And we filmed it. Of course, they didn't come out then, but they put up, and this was very early stages of putting up the remote cameras. The technology's not like it is now, but they did manage to get some footage of a wolf coming out of a pen. And then, of course, this is '96. President Clinton, Chelsea Clinton, Hillary was there. The Clintons were vacationing in Jackson, flew up in 3 helicopters. You know, they were only in one, kind of a protection thing, to see the wolves. They landed at the well behind the Buffalo Ranch. This is a Secret Service guy. I got to know all of them well. The pups had escaped out of the pen because a tree had fallen on it, and we had set leg hold traps, small leg hold traps around the pen to try and catch the pups to put them back in the pen. I was actually up there that morning by myself, springing these traps, thinking, you know, it might be a good idea to not have leg hold traps set. So I was going around the pen, de-arming these traps. That was my famous moment. I've written about it. Maybe none of you have read it. When I was working on a trap and 9 came up through the chain link. You know, we were from here to Kira, just away, and she was studying me and looking at me. You know, everybody has those special moments with wolves. That's why we are all in this room. But that was one of my special moments with 9. And then I left. I'm going down the trail to get back to the Buffalo Ranch to wait for the president to come. And I start seeing guys walking up in the hills with machine guns, riding horses with rifles, and I'm like, what the heck? I mean, they just infiltrated the entire area around the Rose Creek Pen with protection, with people with rifles and machine guns ready to deal with if there was, and this is prior to 9/11, it was a big deal. Anyways, they came in, everybody wanted to be with the president. I got stuck walking with Hillary. And I cannot tell you how many times I thought about that 3 years ago, seeing this election, going, how you doing, Hillary? I was carrying an elk quarter, because remember our rule, no going to the pen unless we were feeding. So we had to keep to the rules even with the president. And we waited a long time for the president to show up. And so this elk quarter was gone. And when I put it in the backpack, it bled all over my back. So my entire back was covered in blood. And she never said one thing. The whole time. Like, your back's pretty bloody. And so it begins. No one thought we'd see him like you guys have. So this is one of the early photos. Everybody thought it's not going to get any better than this. And you know, we saw a kill. And we thought, you know, we're just never going to get enough events like this to actually quantify it. It's going to be rare, it's going to be too far. I mean, we had discussions, believe it or not, before the wolves were released, where will they even come out of the trees? Because these are wolves from a forested environment. And Yellowstone's so open, they're probably going to be leery of people, and they're going to hang to the trees. Would we even see them? And I think, as you guys can attest to, you know what happened. And that truly is because we have followed all the methods that came before Yellowstone wolf reintroduction. And we've continued to improve them like everybody else has worldwide. But the one thing everybody else worldwide does not have is being able to observe them like this and get a sample size. Not just anecdotes, but a sample size. And arguably, that's truly what has set us apart. And so, I know you were all waiting for this graph. This is in a lot of ways our most important graphic. And actually, Isle Royale National Park, Island Lake Superior, Isle Royale, or Lake Superior shaped like a wolf head, and the eye of the wolf is Isle Royale. Probably the most famous wolf study in the world, started in 1958. This is their main thing, population ecology, counting the wolves and moose every year. Those two objectives are their top objectives. Now, of course, they're restoring wolves there through reintroduction, but just counting wolves there and prey every year. Now, they do other things, don't get me wrong, but those two things are their fundamental contributions to predator-prey ecology. And why has it happened? And what's going to happen in the future? Which sounds simple, but it's not. And so, and Kira, by the way, I do need to say this. Kira did a map of 24 years of wolf territories. And I forget this, but we do have a book coming out this year on the occasion of the 25th, summarizing not everything. Sadly, we hit up against word limits, and we went over those word limits, and the publisher, University of Chicago Press, would not relent, so we had to slash a big part of the book. There are things that we didn't cover, but we tried to be as comprehensive as we can. Kira did a very nice territory map that we produce, the Wolf Project, for our annual reports every year. She did one in one page for that book. Sadly, we fought as hard as we could to get the book to come out before the summer season. If we can meet a February 7th deadline, one more, it'll come out in October this year. And so we're very excited about that. It's more to tell the story of the wolves, but we feel other stories are coming out, so we need to have our story there. And then for our archival, and we're competing with Rick. But everybody's got a Yellowstone wolf story. We had to get ours out there for historic purposes, for scientific purposes, for conservation purposes. So sadly it's October, but it's 2020. But it's when you see Kira's plot, to see the year, the progression, it's very interesting to see the evolution. And so I need to finish, and I'm thinking, geez, these folks are so tired of me talking all the time. What am I going to say? And I was actually reading a book today on trees, of all things. You get ideas from all different quarters. And the last quote in the book was by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who is a hero of mine, if you've ever read his stuff, founded the Transcendentalist movement. The wonder is that we can see these trees and not wonder more. So I thought, how can I say something about wolves that's like that? So I will finish. The wonder is that we can see these wolves and not wonder more. Emerson slightly revised.
Well, thank you very much, folks, and incredible, Doug. I really enjoyed that very much. Very, very much.